Hi, this is Christian Ronaldo again with, I believe it's week 3 already of English 242. And this week we're reading A White Heron, The Wife of His Youth, and A Sweatshop Romance. And Professor Barr asks the question, how are differing American identities being put together in these three short stories? And when thinking about issues of race, class, ethnicity, and gender. Well, we'll start from the beginning. If we're going to look at a white heron, all right, we have Sylvia. First off, I'd like to say that um, it seems like a major part of the of building an American identity, all three facets and all three of these lifestyles is seems to be morality or some issue dealing with morality. So that's going to be a reoccurring theme that we see in all three of these short stories. All right, and when we go to look at a white heron, we see Sylvia, and she doesn't necessarily want to her her love of the white heron forbids her basically of giving away its position, and she sees it almost as like I don't know, I want to say like a spirit animal or something. Like it was so beautiful, she didn't want to see it destroyed, and so that's kind of her love of nature, and I believe that many Americans have a great love of this land and the nature. So I think that maybe the white heron is an embodiment of that passion for the environment um, and maybe coexisting with the hunter that's in that kind of duality there with Americans, but and so she's kind of building her own, as she's getting older, she hasn't explored much, and there's also that sense of exploration as an American, and we love to explore, and so I think that's part of that developing the identity, love for nature, and love for exploring nature. When she gets to the top of the pine tree, she looks out across and she can see all the little towns and oceans, and she gets a snapshot of the world beyond her own realm or her house and her area with her calf, her cow, or whatever. But so that's kind of her development of American identity. I guess gender does play into that a little bit, but we get more or less into racial stuff and when we get to the wife of his youth, and the wife of his youth, we're discussing Mr. Ryder, and he is the leader of or called the Dean of the Blue Veins, and this is called a little society of colored persons organized in the northern cities shortly after the war. And so it's basically his desire, his perception that being being black was almost sub being white, beneath or below being white, and his desire to become white or be accepted by the white community is the reason he's kind of formed um, this organization, the Blue Bloods. And so at the end of the story, when the wife from his youth came in, Liza, let's see, not Liza Jane. I mean, perhaps it is Liza, and she's been looking for what 30 years to finally find him, and she finally and this is where we're dealing with the issue of morality in the wife of his youth, is that he was going to marry the other light-skinned lady, and the term mulatto is used quite frequently in this, and I guess since we were discussing mulatto, she was like perhaps lighter skinned than he was, and that was something that attracted him to marry her. But when the wife of his youth, who was, for lack of better words, very, very black, um, comes and after 30 years of searching for him, he chooses the right thing to do, which is to return to her and in his rightful place to marry her, even though um, she wasn't lighter skinned than him. And so uh, his morality won over his own shame and the color of his skin, which is an incredible thing. and then so that's kind of how morality and issues of class and race play into the wife of his youth. And so when we get to a sweatshop romance, where I believe it's a Jewish sweatshop, and we're talking about discussing Jewish part of town. We deal with an issue that I think a lot of Americans deal with, which is the notion that we need to constantly be working. And so it's um, and what we see is that though Haman's complacency in delaying his marriage proposition to Baal, and then David's subsequent proposal to Baal. So he buried himself so much in his work, and then demeaned his own self, and by not speaking up to the subhuman conditions of the sweatshop, and then he eventually lost out in his proposal to Baal. And so I guess this is written around a time when a lot of Jewish families were considered a minority in New York, like I said, we have, I guess during this time we had the Rothschilds, the Lehmans, and other major banking families that were moving up in the world, but that doesn't really have to do with this, but it kind of does because of the Jewish component. But that tendency to constantly be working rather than enjoying life, and so that identity where we're constantly working and not stopping to enjoy life is also something that is part of a different facet of American identity. So in the three of these, we've got a white heron, which is like kind of isolationism and a love of nature, and then kind of like a coming of age tale, and Sylvia's love for that white heron, and it's her morality to choose not to disclose the location of that white heron. And in the wife of his youth, we have Mr. Ryder's decision to honor his marriage to the wife of his youth. And in a sweatshop romance, we have Haman, which is actually he made the wrong decision in this one, and ended up losing out his marriage to Belle, the girl of his dreams. So anyway, that's my kind of outlook on these three. And once again, my name is Christian Ronaldo, and this is week 3 of English 242. Thank you all. Have a nice evening.